There comes a moment in the journey when faith does not feel the same anymore. What once felt natural and strong now feels distant and quiet. The prayers that used to flow easily now seem shorter and harder to express. The heart that once burned with passion now feels a little colder. And the presence of God, which once felt so close, now seems harder to notice. Many times this shift happens slowly, without us realizing it at first. You may still believe, but something inside feels different. The excitement is not as strong, the desire is not as consistent, and the connection feels weaker. It is not that you have turned away completely, but something has changed along the way. The routines may still be there, but the depth feels missing, and that can leave you wondering what happened. It can feel confusing and even a little discouraging. Sometimes life gets busy, and without noticing, other things begin to take priority. Responsibilities grow, distractions increase, and time with God slowly becomes less frequent. Not because you wanted it to happen, but because it happened little by little. The heart does not grow distant overnight. It happens in small moments, small choices, and small shifts in attention. And before long, the difference becomes noticeable. There are also moments when challenges and disappointments affect our faith, when prayers do not seem answered the way we expected, or when life feels heavier than we can handle. Something inside begins to weaken. Questions may arise, and doubts may quietly settle in. It becomes harder to hold on to the same level of trust, and in those moments, faith can feel fragile. Maybe today, you find yourself in that place, not completely lost, but not as strong as you once were. You remember how it used to feel, and you notice the difference now. There is a quiet awareness that something has changed, and even if you cannot fully explain it, you can feel it. It is a subtle but real shift in your spiritual life. But recognizing this moment is more important than it may seem, because when you begin to notice that your faith feels different, it means your heart is still aware. It means something inside you still cares. And that awareness is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of something deeper that is about to unfold. When we begin to understand this season, something important starts to shift inside of us. The weakening of faith is not something new or unique to us. Throughout the Bible, we see that even strong men and women of God faced moments where their faith felt shaken. They experienced fear, doubt, and deep uncertainty. And yet, their stories did not end there. This reminds us that what we are going through is part of a bigger journey. Think about the times when great leaders questioned, when prophets felt overwhelmed, and when even the closest followers struggled to believe. These moments were not hidden, they were recorded for us to see. That alone tells us something powerful. God never expected perfection, but He always worked through process. Faith was never meant to be a straight, unbroken line. It moves, it grows, and sometimes it feels like it weakens before it becomes stronger again. What you are feeling right now does not mean that your faith is gone. It means your faith is being stretched in ways you may not fully understand yet. Growth often comes through seasons that feel uncomfortable or uncertain. Just like muscles grow through resistance, faith grows through moments that challenge it. And even when it feels like you are losing strength, something deeper may actually be forming inside of you. It is also important to understand that God is not distant during these moments. He is not stepping away because your faith feels weaker. In fact, He is often closer than you realize. Even when your emotions do not reflect it, His presence remains steady. He is not measuring you based on how strong you feel. He is walking with you through every part of this process, even the parts that feel confusing. Sometimes we believe that strong faith means never struggling, but that is not the truth. Real faith includes moments of questioning, moments of silence, and moments where things do not make sense. And still, in the middle of all that, there is a quiet thread that keeps you connected to God. That thread is not broken, even if it feels thinner than before. It is still there, holding you. So instead of seeing this season as failure, begin to see it as part of your growth. What feels like weakness may actually be preparation. What feels like distance may be leading you into a deeper understanding of God. And what feels uncertain now may soon become a testimony of how your faith was not destroyed, but refined through the journey. There is something subtle about the way distance begins to grow in our spiritual life. It rarely happens in a loud or obvious way. Instead, it moves quietly, almost unnoticed, through small shifts in our daily choices. We do not wake up one day completely far from God. It happens slowly, step by step, in ways that seem harmless at first. And because it is so quiet, it can go unnoticed for longer than we expect. It often starts with small changes in priority. Time that was once set apart for God becomes filled with other things. Moments of prayer become shorter or sometimes skipped without much thought. Reading the Word becomes less frequent, replaced by distractions that feel more urgent in the moment. None of these choices seem serious on their own, but over time, they begin to add up in ways that affect our connection. Distractions play a powerful role in this process. Life becomes busy, responsibilities increase, and our attention gets pulled in many directions. Without realizing it, we begin to give less space to what truly feeds our faith. The noise of everyday life becomes louder than the quiet voice of God, and slowly, that silence where we once met Him becomes less familiar. Another part of this distance comes from small compromises. Things we once avoided become easier to accept. Habits that once felt wrong begin to feel normal. The sensitivity we once had starts to fade little by little. And without noticing, our hearts begin to adjust to a different rhythm, one that is less centered on God and more focused on everything else. The difficult part is that this process does not feel dramatic. There is no clear moment where everything changes at once. Instead, it feels gradual, almost invisible. Until one day we stop and realize that something important is missing. The closeness we once felt is no longer the same. The connection that used to feel strong now feels distant and harder to reach. But recognizing this quiet distance is an important moment, because it means there is still awareness, still sensitivity, still something inside that notices the difference. And that awareness is not meant to bring guilt, but to bring clarity. It is an invitation to look closely, to understand what has been happening, and to begin turning back before the distance grows even more. There is a turning point that begins with honesty, not with perfection, not with strength, but with the simple willingness to admit that something is not right. Recognizing that your faith feels weaker is not a sign of failure, it is a sign of awareness. It means your heart is still paying attention, and that awareness becomes the first step toward restoration. Because nothing can be healed if it is never acknowledged. Sometimes we try to ignore what we feel inside. We keep moving forward, hoping things will fix themselves over time. We tell ourselves that it is just a phase or that it will pass without effort. But the truth is, avoiding the issue only allows the distance to grow. What we do not face, we cannot change. And what we deny, we cannot surrender. There is something powerful about coming before God with honesty. Not trying to hide, not trying to pretend, but simply saying, something feels off and I need you. That kind of openness creates space for God to move. He does not expect you to come with everything figured out. He responds to sincerity, to truth, and to a heart that is willing to be real. Admitting weakness can feel uncomfortable. It can feel like we are exposing something we would rather keep hidden. But in reality, that is where transformation begins. I prepared a devotional called New Vase, 21 Days to Restore Your Life with God. It's a 21-day spiritual journey with reflections, prayers, and Bible verses that can help you renew your faith, heal your heart, and walk closer to the Lord. In the first pinned comment, when we stop pretending to be strong, We allow God to meet us in our real condition, and that is where His grace becomes active in a deeper way. He meets us exactly where we are. This moment of recognition is not about guilt or shame. It is not about pointing out everything that went wrong. It is about creating a starting point for change. When you see clearly where you are, you can begin to move in a new direction. Without that clarity, it is easy to stay stuck in the same place without realizing it. And as you take this step of honesty, something begins to shift inside. The distance that once felt overwhelming starts to feel bridgeable. The silence begins to open again. Because when you admit your need for God, you are already moving closer to Him. And that movement, even if it feels small, is the beginning of something new. There is a place where faith begins to breathe again, and it is not found in noise or pressure, but in quiet moments with God. Returning to that secret place is not about doing something impressive. It is about being present. It is about stepping away from everything else, even for a few minutes, and choosing to reconnect. This place does not require perfect words or strong emotions. It only requires a willing heart. At first, it may feel unfamiliar or even uncomfortable. The silence might seem empty, and your thoughts may wander more than you expect, but that does not mean nothing is happening. Sometimes, the most important moments with God are the ones that feel simple and quiet. It is in that stillness that your heart begins to slow down and realign. Little by little, something inside starts to soften again. Prayer in this season does not need to be long or complicated. It can be as simple as speaking honestly, even if all you can say is that you feel distant. God is not waiting for perfect sentences. He is listening for sincerity. When you come to Him as you are, without trying to impress, you create a space where real connection can grow again. The same is true when it comes to seeking Him. It does not have to begin with intensity, but with consistency. A few minutes each day can become something powerful over time. It is not about how much you do at once, but about returning again and again. That repeated choice builds something deeper than a single emotional moment ever could. In that secret place, your heart begins to heal in ways you may not immediately notice. The pressure starts to lift, the noise begins to fade, and the distance slowly decreases. You may not feel a sudden change, but something steady is taking place within you. God works in quiet ways, often beneath the surface, restoring what felt weak. And as you continue to return to this place, even when it feels small, you will begin to notice a shift. The connection that once felt distant starts to come back. The presence that seemed far begins to feel closer again, because when you take a step toward God, no matter how small it seems, He meets you there and begins to do what only He can do. Faith, just like anything alive, needs to be fed in order to grow. When it is not nourished, it begins to weaken, not because it has disappeared, but because it lacks what sustains it. In the same way our bodies need daily food, our spirit needs something constant to stay strong. And that nourishment comes through the Word of God. It is not just information, it is life being poured into us. There are moments when reading the Bible may not feel exciting or emotional. You may open it and feel like nothing is happening. But growth is not always visible in the moment. Just like eating a meal does not immediately change your body, the Word works over time. It strengthens you in ways you may not notice right away. Something is being built inside you, even in the quiet. The Word of God brings direction when your mind feels confused. It speaks truth when your thoughts are filled with doubt. It reminds you of who God is when your emotions try to tell you something different. And in seasons where faith feels weak, those reminders become even more important. Because what you feed your mind will shape what you believe. Sometimes we wait to feel motivated before we return to the Word. But the truth is, the Word itself is what brings that motivation back. You do not need to feel ready, you just need to begin. Even if it is a few verses, even if it feels simple, it matters. Each time you choose to listen or read, you are strengthening something inside of you. As you continue feeding your spirit, your perspective begins to shift. The things that once felt overwhelming may start to feel lighter. The confusion begins to clear, and your thoughts become more grounded. Not because everything around you changed, but because something within you is being renewed. The Word has a way of realigning your heart without forcing it. And over time, what once felt distant begins to feel familiar again. The connection starts to rebuild, not through emotion alone, but through truth taking root in your life. Faith grows when it is fed consistently, even in small amounts. And as you keep returning to the Word, you are giving your faith exactly what it needs to become strong again. When faith feels weak, the battle often shifts into the mind. Thoughts begin to rise that were not as strong before. Doubt starts to whisper, fear begins to grow, and insecurity becomes louder than confidence. It can feel like your mind is working against you instead of helping you. And if you are not careful, those thoughts can begin to shape what you believe. What once felt certain now feels uncertain. These thoughts do not usually come all at once. They build gradually, repeating the same messages over and over again. What if things don't work out? What if God doesn't come through? What if I am alone in this? These questions can feel real, especially when emotions are involved. And the more attention you give them, the stronger they become. They begin to influence how you see everything around you. But in moments like this, there is a quiet decision that needs to be made. You have to choose what you are going to believe. Not based on how you feel, but based on what is true. Feelings can change quickly, but truth remains steady. And the truth of God's Word does not depend on your current situation. It remains the same, even when your emotions are unstable. Fighting these thoughts does not mean ignoring them completely. It means recognizing them and responding differently. Instead of agreeing with fear, you begin to replace it with truth. Instead of letting doubt stay, you challenge it with what God has already said. This is not always easy, especially when your feelings are strong, but it is a necessary step in strengthening your faith again. The more you practice this, the more your mind begins to shift. What once felt overwhelming starts to lose its power. The same thoughts may try to return, but they no longer control you the same way. You begin to stand on something stronger than your emotions. And that foundation becomes more stable with time. As you continue in this process, you start to notice a difference inside. The noise becomes quieter, the fear becomes weaker, and your confidence slowly begins to return. Not because everything around you has changed, but because what you are choosing to believe is changing, and that choice will continue to shape the strength of your faith moving forward. There comes a point in the journey where faith is no longer carried by emotion, but by decision. The feelings that once made everything seem easy are not as present, and what remains is a quiet choice to stay. This is where many people struggle, because it is harder to continue when you do not feel the same passion. But this is also where faith begins to mature. It moves from something emotional into something intentional. In these moments, you may pray and feel nothing different. You may read and not feel immediate inspiration. You may seek God and wonder if anything is happening at all. And yet, choosing to continue in those moments is more powerful than it seems, because you are not being led by what you feel, but by what you believe. And that kind of faith is steady, not temporary. Feelings can come and go, and they are not always reliable. There will be days when everything feels strong and alive, and others when it feels quiet and distant. If faith depended only on emotion, it would constantly rise and fall. But real faith is built on something deeper. It is rooted in trust, not in how you feel at a given moment. Staying consistent without emotional reward requires patience. It requires a kind of commitment that goes beyond comfort. But every time you choose to remain, even when it feels dry, you are strengthening your foundation. You are proving that your faith is not dependent on circumstances. And that builds something lasting inside of you. Over time, something begins to shift again. Not always in a sudden or dramatic way, but gradually. The connection starts to feel real again, not because emotions returned first, but because consistency created space for it. You begin to notice small changes, small moments where peace returns, where clarity comes back, where hope rises again. And in that process, you start to understand something important. Faith is not about always feeling close to God, but about choosing to stay close even when you do not feel it. That decision, repeated over time, becomes the strength that carries you forward. And it leads you into a deeper, more stable relationship than before. There is a powerful way to strengthen your faith that many people overlook, and it begins by looking back. When your present feels uncertain, remembering what God has already done can bring clarity and hope. It is easy to forget past moments when God showed up, especially when you are facing something new. But those moments are not random. They are reminders. They are evidence that you have not been alone on this journey. Think about the times when you did not know what to do, and somehow things worked out. The moments when you felt lost and direction came in an unexpected way. The situations that seemed impossible, but changed in ways you could not have planned. Those were not coincidences. They were signs of God's presence and care in your life, and they still matter today. When faith feels weak, your mind tends to focus on what is missing right now. It highlights the uncertainty, the waiting, and the unanswered questions. But remembering shifts your focus. It brings your attention back to what has already been done. It reminds you that what feels uncertain now does not erase what has already been proven. God's past faithfulness speaks into your present situation. Personal testimonies are not just memories, they are anchors. They keep you grounded when everything else feels unstable. They remind you that God does not change, even when your circumstances do. The same God who helped you before is still with you now. His character has not shifted, and his ability has not decreased. What he has done before still reflects who he is today. Sometimes you may need to intentionally bring those memories back to the surface. Reflect on them, speak them out, and allow them to settle in your heart again. This is not about living in the past, but about drawing strength from it. It is about recognizing patterns of faithfulness that continue through your life, and those patterns can give you confidence to keep moving forward. As you begin to remember, something inside you starts to come alive again. Hope begins to rise, and fear starts to lose its hold. You realize that your current situation is not the first time you have needed God. And just like before, he is still able to move, to guide, and to restore. And that realization begins to rebuild what once felt weak. There is something deeply hopeful about this truth. Faith can be restored. No matter how weak it feels right now, no matter how distant things seem, it is not beyond renewal. As long as there is still a desire in your heart to return, even if it feels small, there is a path forward. God does not measure your faith by its current strength, but by your willingness to come back. And that willingness matters more than you think. You may feel like you have drifted too far or that too much time has passed. But distance does not cancel relationship. It only creates a space that can be crossed again. God does not stand far away waiting for you to fix everything first. He meets you in the moment you decide to turn back. That first step toward him is already a step into restoration. Restoration does not always happen all at once. It is often a process, something that unfolds little by little. Just like faith did not weaken overnight, it will not necessarily become strong in a single moment. But each step you take, each moment you return, each decision you make to stay connected builds something new, and over time, that new strength becomes steady and real. There is also something beautiful about restored faith. It carries a depth that was not there before. It is no longer based only on emotion or routine, but on experience and understanding. It has been tested, stretched, and refined. And because of that, it becomes stronger in a different way. Not louder, but more rooted and more secure. God does not reject those who come back to him. He does not turn away from a heart that is seeking him again. Instead, he receives, restores, and strengthens. He lifts what feels weak and rebuilds what feels broken. And he does it with patience, with care, and with love. His response to your return is not judgment, but restoration. So if your faith feels weaker today, do not see it as the end of your story. See it as a moment that can lead to something deeper. You are not too far, and it is not too late. With God, renewal is always possible, and as you continue to move toward him, you will find that your faith is not only restored, but stronger, deeper, and more real than it has ever been. Brother and sister, may you walk forward today with renewed strength in your heart, knowing that your faith is not gone, it is being rebuilt. May God fill you with peace in the moments you feel weak and remind you that he is still with you every step of the way. And may your heart find rest in the truth that he is working in you, even now. If this reflection spoke to you, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment sharing what touched your heart. Your voice can encourage someone else who is going through the same struggle. And if you know someone who needs this message, share it with them and be a light in their life today. May God bless your life, guide your steps, and strengthen your faith day after day. Keep moving forward, keep trusting, and keep seeking his presence in every moment. See you in the next video. Until then.